In the next half an hour, we will continue with Eyewitness News' Roundtable. And for this conversation, I'm going to be joined by Judith, who is a regular columnist on EWN, and also Professor Amanda Gouws, because before we learned of President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to address the nation, we had actually wanted to discuss what are the fault lines that have emerged following former President Jacob Zuma's saga. And I think that the president introduced that topic for us. But before, and also we've got Professor Bheki Mngomezulu also joining us on this call. I think as we start off this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with you, Judith. Let's talk around the decisions around COVID-19. It was always going to be a difficult one for Cyril Ramaphosa's government. That balancing life and livelihoods is always never an easy one. This time around, giving to some, but still taking away from the alcohol industry. Judith?
Good evening, Mahlatse, and thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I mean, all of these COVID restrictions, as you rightly say, are about balancing lives and livelihoods, and particularly in a country like ours, where there's such deep levels of poverty, and we've seen the way in which COVID-19 has ravaged both through the communities, so causing a health crisis, but also causing an economic crisis. And then we've got the trifecta, because we also have a political crisis, in a sense, on our hands. So very difficult. I think the president sounded and looked tired. There was a part of the speech where you could actually hear him sighing, and who can really blame him? There's a lot to be done. But so in a sense, it was what he was saying, given the trajectory of the numbers, what he was saying made perfect sense. Yes, of course, the alcohol ban, we always talk about that. And I think we've become sort of used to these bans going hand in hand with greater restrictions. But I think with regard to restaurants, of course, there was some slight reprieve there. But I do think that there was some interesting and important news on vaccine production and on ramping up vaccination. I mean, I think, Mahlatse, the only way we're going to be able to get ourselves out of this quagmire in some way is to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And so it's good that we can ramp up those efforts. But I suspect that, well, I know that the economic impact of COVID-19 will be with us for a long time to come, but almost an impossible balancing act for a government like governments around the world, and more particularly for a government like ours, with the high levels of poverty, inequality, and also unemployment in our country.
We talk about ramping up vaccinations, but, we have seen this vaccine hesitancy, which is a real thing for South Africans. And again, we had the president even using his skills of speaking the many different languages, just again begging the South African public to say, please go out and vaccinate. But of course, when you look at the numbers, we are now at 130,000 vaccinations per weekday. The aim, he's been trying to tell us, or he's been pushing, that it should be 300,000 a day. So not achieving that. Professor Amanda Gouws, that the president in this quagmire of, even when we do have the available vaccines, we are not seeing South Africans coming forward and actually grabbing the opportunity to be vaccinated.
Yes, there is a reluctance, and there is also the conspiracy theories around the vaccinations. But the only way that we are going to get ahead of this virus is if at least 2/3 of the population is vaccinated, to give us herd immunity. So this reluctance, I think people should actually look at the science. And what we see now is that maybe even if you have been vaccinated, you can get COVID, but you won't get that sick, and that means that you won't overwhelm the hospitals and need that many beds and need oxygen for people. So what it shows us, that if you're vaccinated, it actually does save lives. And I think this sort of conspiracy theories around vaccinations people should by now have seen the evidence that vaccinations make a difference. And really, we can only encourage people to get vaccinated.
Yeah, and we can only do that. Let me bring you in, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. For the first time, the president now having to address another political crisis that is developing, the violence that we have seen in KwaZulu-Natal and also spreading to Gauteng overnight in parts of Johannesburg. If you can unmute there.
Yes, good evening, Mahlatse and my other colleagues. It is a critical issue, more especially because it has a potential to have detrimental effects, not only to our economy, but also to the politics of the country. As the president mentioned, the issue of ethnic identity, there is a serious concern. If you recall what happened in the early 1990s, ethnicity was in fact a critical issue, as much as politics was also a critical issue. But I think that I have a couple of issues or a couple of concerns in as far as this violence is concerned. There are talks that the police forces must intensify their struggle against this particular issue. And then there are also talks that the president and the minister, Mapisa Ngagula, should deploy forces. For me, that is trying to deal with the symptoms and not the root cause of the problem. The question we should be asking ourselves is, how did we get here? Once we address that question, we're then in a better position to try and address the root cause of this whole thing. There are perceptions down there, Mahlatse. I will tell you because I happen to be in the province right now, even though I'm based in Cape Town. There are a couple of things that are happening. There are perceptions here where people are asking a number of questions, to some of which I can't even answer. One of the questions is, why did Deputy Chief Justice Zondo take the matter straight to the Constitutional Court without taking it to the lower courts, as is usually the case? That is a question that our legal experts might be in a position to answer. But from where I'm standing, that becomes a difficult question for me to answer, because ordinarily, if I've committed a crime, I'm reported to the local police station. My case is heard there. If I'm not happy, I take it up the ladder. If it is a constitutional matter, then it goes all the way to the Constitutional Court. So the moment I have the Constitutional Court as my first point of entry, then it becomes problematic, because once I lose the case there, what other recourse, what other options do I have at my disposal? So that is one of the critical questions. Then the second question is, when the acting Chief Justice Sisi Kampepe read out the judgment against former President Zuma, people are concerned about the tone of that judgment. The feeling is that it was riddled with emotions, and in some instances, the Chief Justice ended up bringing issues that had appeared in the media, but that were nowhere in the court papers. So then they're asking the question, was this a legal matter or a political matter? So those are some of the concerns that people are having on the ground.
If you're listening to us, this is Inside Eyewitness News. We are doing some analysis following the address by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And there, the voice you've been hearing is that of Bheki Mngomezulu, who is talking to us about what could be behind the protest in KwaZulu-Natal, and basically raising some of the issues that have been raised by some of the supporters of President Jacob Zuma. If you want to join in the conversation, we are on 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. I will come to you, Judith and Amanda. Let's take a first caller here. Siyabonga is in Vanderbilt Park in here in Gauteng. Siyabonga.
Hi, Mahlatse, how are you?
I'm good. What's your comment?
Yes, my comment is seeing the videos and seeing online, on Twitter, and also on the news, people busy chanting and singing in hundreds of groups, not wearing masks. And yet, we're sitting with this Delta variant that's busy running up and like busy infecting us drastically, and Gauteng being the epicenter. Do you think that 2 weeks is going to be enough to curb this COVID infections? I mean, already in Joburg, it's the epicenter, and these people are singing without masks.
Yeah, that's a question. Thank you very much for that question, Siyabonga. And we heard the president saying there that they will prosecute those that are violating the COVID-19 regulations. I want to go back to what Bheki Mngomezulu was saying there, Judith, basically saying that the reasons why we are seeing the violent protests were around the Constitutional Court being the point of call for the State Capture Commission, and we have heard many of these complaints being made by Zuma supporters.
Thanks, Mahlatse. Yes, and you know, Judge Raymond Zondo, in his when the commission was dealing with former President Zuma, had given Jacob Zuma every opportunity to to be heard. And so I do think that there are a couple of issues here. I think the one is that we do need to have some level of education about the rule of law and about what it means to live in a rights-based constitutional democracy. So I think what happens is where you get somebody like the former president who is now at the receiving end of this judgment, there's a lot of misunderstanding about process. In my view, the commission had no other alternative. They asked for direct access to the Constitutional Court on what was a matter of grave and egregious contempt. So the idea that the former president, also this confusion about whether he had a right to be heard as a criminal, as somebody in a criminal trial, that is also erroneous, because it was a civil proceedings and these were motion proceedings, but it is an age-old rule of our courts that people are able to have a sanction like the one Justice Kampempe and the majority of the Concourt imposed on the former president. He was given ample time. In fact, the Chief Justice wrote to President Zuma, former President Zuma, asking him for suggestions on how he might be dealt with. So the suggestion,
and some people actually were suggesting that the courts were overreaching, and even the State Capture Commission went to all lengths to actually try and reach the president. But I think what it has raised, especially hearing from the president himself, is this issue of this ethnic inspired violence. And in this case, we can put it as it is, a former president of the Zulu descent, and seeing this violence emerging from KwaZulu-Natal, and perhaps a symptom of things that we have not dealt with in the past. Amanda?
Yes, I think that we shouldn't think that this is something that just started recently. Right from his rape trial, President Zuma has drawn on Zulu support and has actually, whenever he was in trouble, mobilized people to support him, and specifically from his home base that is in KwaZulu-Natal. So this ethnic mobilization, as the president has said tonight, is a dangerous thing. It is a dangerous thing because it undermines the rule of law. And I think this is what Judith has been saying, is that we need to look at what is happening with this type of behavior. It undermines the rule of law, and ex-President Zuma's attacks on the legitimacy and the credibility of the court has undermined the justice system. So when we have this sort of stirring of nationalism, ethnic nationalism, where people start to think that they are above the law, it has dangerous implications for democracy. And the problem is that we also don't know who are the actual supporters of the ex-president and who are actually people who are opportunistic, the criminal element. They're all banding together now around something that they've singled out as a cause, which is not really a cause, but it is the undermining of democracy. And so this violence then is very difficult to untangle who's all involved in it.
And it's been quite difficult for us to...
Very difficult, but it really damages infrastructure, it damages the economy, and it damages democracy.
I'm just going to take a couple of calls and come back to you, Prof. Mngomezulu, especially around this reports of the Zulu nationalism that is behind the protest. Let's take a call from Tebogo in Baklu. Tebogo, you are saying that the president is inconsistent?
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. The president is inconsistent, but I want to comment on Prof. Mngomezulu because I've been listening as I'm holding on.
Yes.
And I think he's staring just like the president. This is not about ethnicity or ethnicism. Please.
What is it about?
It's about injustice or justice. which side are you on. There is nothing wrong for people to support one of their own. I'm not Zulu, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are not Zulu in terms of as a nation, but they support the justice system to be fair to everybody, and including former President Zuma. You see, I don't think people will be shouting and screaming and kicking and banging things and protesting had it not been that the ANC failed to persecute and to hold apartheid generals who killed and maimed women and children, innocent.
Okay, Tebogo, are you suggesting that because we have not prosecuted apartheid, those who were behind apartheid atrocities, therefore we cannot take action against the president?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, number one, that was a big error from the ANC government. Zuma, Mandela, Bheki. So I'm talking about the ANC government, Zuma included. We should have done that. But I'm not saying that if somebody is wrong, they should not be prosecuted. Nobody should be above the law. But all former President Zuma was asking for was to be heard.
All right, that's Tebogo. I'm going to just let you go now. We've got Lesile in Limpopo. You are saying that the lawlessness in KwaZulu-Natal and Johannesburg is an issue of tribalism. So disagreeing with Tebogo there?
Yes, Mahlatse, how are you?
I'm all right. Go for it. We are running quickly out of time because our roundtable was shortened today. Please be quick.
Okay, I will be quick. I'm just disappointed on people like the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Galana. I'm talking, President was just taken to prison 2 days. He's talking about the pardoning of the president. This man is behind all this as well. You cannot. You see, he wants to instigate lawlessness in KwaZulu-Natal in Gauteng. I'm saying tribalism cannot be condoned. We don't like it. I'm associating with a lot of Zulus. I like them, but they're not all. I would say bad. Like things are not all good.
Okay, so okay.
I can see that Sita and some other ANC high-ranking ANC officials are instigating violence against Ramaphosa.
All right, Lesile, I'm going to have to move. Thank you very much. Lesile, they're condemning the comments by the Premier of KZN following the violence that we saw and asking for a pardon. Mandla Mhlongo, before I go to my panelist, what are you saying about former President Zuma's arrest?
Just wanted to ask some questions there, because there is something that I'm confused. Especially there are these laws that are recognized prior to the commission of an offense, like the law that says if maybe someone has failed to assist the police, and that person will be prosecuted or pay a certain fine.
Yes.
So now my question is that is there any recognized sanction by the law regarding the refusal to appear before the Zondo Commission or any commission that is running at that time?
Okay, Mandla, I'm not a legal expert, but what I can answer is that what happened is that he is being found guilty of being in contempt of court. We know that the State Capture Commission had gone to the Constitutional Court asking for 2 years, and at the end, he was given 15 months by the justices. And often when there is mitigation presented to the courts, those that are the justices could then decide on that. But let's go back to Bheki on your comments around this rise in ethnic nationalism that we are seeing behind President Jacob Zuma. Should it not really be about what Judith was talking about, around upholding the rule of law and justice and versus injustice, and not a tribal matter?
No, you know what, Mahlatse? Let's first start off by dispelling this notion of tribalism and Zulu identity being at work here. Unless we are saying that the likes of Kalni House are also Zulus, unless we are saying that people from Mpumalanga are also Zulus, and so on and so forth. So for me, the issue is not necessarily about tribalism, nor is it about Zulu ethnicity. It's about perceptions in the general public, those who feel that the former president has not been treated fairly. And they are citing a number of issues, some of which I've just mentioned. But the other one, maybe drawing from the point that Lesile and Tebogo were making, if former President Zuma was being charged for having not respected the summons, then the law of 1947 would have applied. And that law is clear. It says if you have not respected the summons, you can either be fined £50 or you can be incarcerated for a period not exceeding 6 months. That is what the law says. But unfortunately, then in this case, because Zondo had refused to recuse himself and he presided over a case in which he was conflicted, then he took the matter to the Constitutional Court. Then former President Zuma was charged for being in contempt of court and not necessarily for not having respected the summons. So there's a distinction between the two.
So, Bheki, are we saying that in this instant that the violence is justified that we are seeing out in the streets? If we were to take what you are putting into context, what you're putting across as people's unhappiness with what has happened, is the violence justified then?
Not at all, my sister, not at all. No violence can be justified in a democracy. Under normal circumstances, if you are not happy, there are institutions in place. We even have Chapter 9 institutions. But the problem we have is that once you are engulfed either by anger or by excitement, then your reasoning level goes down. That is the reality. And it doesn't apply to any province, to any individual. That is the reality. So in this case, people are angry and they are acting out of anger. And then secondly, there is a criminal element that has also crept in, and that has complicated the matter even further.
Judith, I'm going to bring you in here because a lot of what Bheki is bringing in there are things that have been communicated by those that are supportive of President Jacob Zuma, and basically at points where they are finding fault with the judicial process and not necessarily with the former president who refused to engage with this, and perhaps exposing the fault line in our democracy, which was supposed to be part of what this conversation was about, around the judiciary and where its powers are and those of political interests.
Yeah, thanks, Mahlatse. So firstly, just to go back to the question you asked about Justice Kampepi's judgment. So the idea that it was emotional, it was strongly worded. I find the use of that word emotional as attaching to a woman judge is quite an insidious form of sexism. And I think we need to nip that in the bud, because I dare say that if it was a man who was delivering the judgment, it wouldn't be described as emotional. And we know that former President Zuma is very good at, invoking these sorts of labels. He was outside in Kandla calling former public protector Thuli Madonsela a girl. So there's that language, which I think is dangerous. There's a lot of confusion there. So Jacob Zuma had plenty of time. He walked out of the Commission of Inquiry. Let's just be clear about that, together with his lawyers, and then afterwards tried to tell all of us that he was doing that because he was taking medication. I don't know how foolish he thinks we are, because we saw it beamed into our living rooms when he and his advocates walked out. He had run out of a road. The Zondo Commission was arguing for was the application of the Commissions Act, and that would perhaps be the right number of years to sentence him. Judge Kampepi said her reasoning was that the Commissions Act didn't apply in this case, and they were perfectly within their rights to order what is called an unsuspended committal. So these are, and I understand that for some people there might be arcane processes, but this is where leadership matters, because if former President Zuma was a leader in any right, he would have said, he would have gone voluntarily and submitted himself to the rule of law, as former President Nelson Mandela did in the Safi matter, where he went to court and he gave evidence. He was slightly irritated that he had to do it. People around him were annoyed that somebody of Madiba's godlike status could be called to account, but he did it. And there was a reason why he did it, to show that everyone, no matter how powerful you are, we are all subject to the same rule of law. What President Zuma did was he cocked a snook at the Constitutional Court. If you read Judge Kempepe's judgment, she is very clear about how egregious his conduct was. He didn't make use of any opportunity to be heard. And when he realized he'd run out of road, he's now using an opportunistic argument. And where this becomes dangerous, and I don't want to get into the tribalism argument, but there are many things on which it's like a hook that you hang all kinds of things. Everyone now who's disgruntled, everyone who wants to raid a liquor store, everyone who's got an issue is hanging it onto the Zuma hook. And in a country like ours, it's dangerous because it's a tinderbox. And President Zuma is sitting in escort prison. His children are sitting in the luxury of their homes while they are stoking this sort of violence or being silent about it. And that is a problem.
I'm so sorry that I'm rushing you all, because, you know, we had planned a whole hour of this conversation, but then, of course, the president had to address the nation. But I wanted to conclude with you, Amanda, and then Bheki, if we've got in a few seconds. Leadership in these critical times, how important is that going to be, especially when we are seeing that anger out in the streets?
Well, I think the leadership, and specifically the leadership of the president, is very important. But I also think that there are laws, and that there are the laws about the Disaster Management Act, and there are other laws that are being broken. And apart from leadership, now the law will have to take its course. So I think people just will have to be arrested to stop this, because, I mean, these are acts of criminality.
Bheki?
No, I share the sentiments that the law should apply, but it should apply evenly. Because one example, if you look at, we looked at what happened to Kalni House, he was arrested for having violated level 4 of the lockdown, which was correct. But the question is, what happened when the EFF leader addressed the masses and in fact said in open defiance that he was not going to respect any of the laws, and nothing happened. So apply the law, but apply it evenly.
The inconsistency by our law enforcement agencies definitely exposed in these past 2 weeks. People have said that we've seen people standing around outside in Nkandla violating those laws and nobody was arrested. I have to apologize that we have to bring this to an end because we had to take that address by the president. Thank you very much to my guest, Professor Amanda Gouws, Judith February, who's a regular columnist on ewn.co.za, and also Prof. Bheki Mngomezulu there joining us for this conversation that's we're going to have again, where we're asking what are the fault lines that have emerged following the Jacob Zuma saga. It's been Inside Eyewitness News, and it's now time for the news.